very honored to speak and share and engage a discussion with you. Coming for this conference to Berlin, I remember the conversation I've had with a Turkish migrant years ago when I was here in Berlin as a fellow at Wissenschaftskolleg. I used to go to the marketplace to buy vegetables and fruits at Winterplatz. At Winterweltplatz, this conversation took place, and we were having a conversation with this Turkish migrant, and a kind of familiarity, because we were speaking in Turkish, a kind of familiarity was established, created between him and me, in spite of the differences of education, sex, class. And then he continued, he wanted to pursue the conversation in German with me. He shifted to German, and seeing that I couldn't follow him, he was surprised, he was taken aback, he was even disappointed, and he said, "So you are a foreigner?" and not speaking German made me a foreigner in his eyes, distanced me from him. And the language, we see how much is a marker between insiders and outsiders, between proximity and difference. He probably felt himself more German and less Turkish in relation to me. I was embarrassed too. And being Turkish in Berlin and not speaking German is indeed embarrassing, as I'm embarrassed today as a European intellectual too, and not being able to address this speech to you in German, but in English. So I'm telling this story to express my apologies, but also to bring into the picture Turkish issue into our discussions. Not to argue in favor or against Turkish membership in European Union, because in a way we have the feeling that this process came to a halt. The two referendums in Europe that took place against the Constitution in Netherlands and in France, it was also in two countries where the Islamic presence in Europe was mostly discussed and debated. And also the Turkish membership, the question of Turkish membership legitimacy is almost questioned. By French, it is named as, do we want a forced marriage, mariage forcé? Although in the eyes of Turks, this is not a forced marriage, it was an outcome of a very natural engagement with the West, which the idea of Westernization, which started before the European Union during the second half of the 19th century, and at that period, it is interesting to remember, to recall that the word civilization didn't mean anything particularistic and religious, but it meant much more the positivistic, Auguste Comtean sense of universal culture that can embrace all other cultures in spite of differences of religion. To remember the debate between French civilization and German Kultur, maybe, as it was put Norbert Elias. Anyhow, Turks have taken this seriously, the idea of civilization as something universal. So I'm going to take Turkey because it crystallizes some of the main issues in relation to Europe and Islam. So not in order to argue in favor or against of the Turkish membership, as I said, but because some of the issues that we have to address, and they are already addressed, are also in relation to Turkey. Because Europe encounters with Islam in many different ways. First, Muslim migration, and Turks are migrants in Germany, also in other European countries, but also through the membership of Turkey as the only major Muslim majority country being a membership to European Union. One of the issues in this encounter is gender equality. It's very important, the encounter between Islam and Europe. One of the main divisive issues are around gender equality. And we can recall that Turkey is the only Muslim country that totally abolished the religious law. Religious family law was adopted from the Swiss civil code. And today, with the reforms, total gender equality is in tune, I would say, with the European standards. Yet, there are, we know, still honor killings that persist, or even sometimes they re-emerge in context of immigration, internal immigration, Kurds leaving because of civil war to the cities, and it becomes a major concern both in Turkish and European publics. Second theme is, for instance, the Islamic veiling issue and the secularism in this encounter between Europe and Islam. Turkey with France share the same commitment to secularism, called in both countries la laïcité. They have adopted the same word, laïclik. And in both countries, the Islamic headscarf debate, l'affaire du foulard, as we first started to name it, occupied a central place in the public debate and the political arena. And it is these two countries that have banned, forbidden the headscarf in the public schools, in the French case, at the universities, and in the parliament in Turkey. When we speak also of Islam, it comes to our mind the Islamic radicalism. Turkey, with other Muslim countries, witnesses the rise of Islamist movements, radical Islamism. At the same time, Turkish Prime Minister Tayyip Erdogan, with a background of this Islamist movement, becomes the partner of the Spanish Prime Minister Zapatero to create the Alliance of Civilizations, which is a very important endeavor, and they have intervened during the cartoon controversy. So through these snapshots, these different contrasting examples, very short, all paradoxical, we can say indeed that Turkey is facing the difficulties of being both a Muslim country and a European, being both a secular and a democratic country. We can say, as Huntington have already coined the term, Turkey is a torn country. Neither nor, neither in this situation nor in that situation. To come to our theme of soul, we can even say Turkey is a tormented soul between these two different cultural sense of belongings. But we can also say that Islam is becoming a European matter, as Europe became an indigenous ideal in the Turkish case, in a Muslim country, as European ideals traveled to a Muslim country and became indigenized, anchored. We can also now say, become aware, that Islam is becoming part of Europe, not as an external factor, but not as a distinctive civilization. That's why we shouldn't speak about maybe dialogue of civilizations, but as Ulrich Beck would have put it, inclusive other, as something which makes part of Europe. First one, I want to a little bit take time on the headscarf debate, come back, because it is very illuminating, illustrative. When I moved from Istanbul to Paris, I thought I have left behind me the headscarf debate that have torn the country between secularists and Islamists for more than 20 decades. And then I moved to Paris, and I found myself in the midst of the same debate. This was a surprise to me, because we always feel, the non-Western, going towards the West, we embrace something novel, toward progress, something unseen. So the time dimension was disturbing, a kind of counterclockwise. It was almost something like déjà vu. I have seen that film before. This changes, of course, the relations between Islam and the West, and as Wolf Lepenis would put it, how we learn from other experiences, if only other experiences have some kind of novelty as well, worth studying. But also, the headscarf debate showed me to what extent the Islam was not bound to a territory, not to a nation state, like Iranian revolution, Turkish secularists adopting the veil, or some Maghreban countries, but it was circulating in other different publics. It was becoming European. It was deterritorialized. It was not Middle Eastern. It was not bound to Islamic countries, but it was becoming an affair in France, but also in Germany in different ways, and now even in Britain. The semantic shift is interesting in the debate. We first started as a headscarf debate, l'affaire du foulard, and then it shifted to veiling, Islamic veiling, and now in the British case we speak about niqab, the full veiling. But also it shows us the vocabulary became more and more Islamic. Foulard, veiling, and now niqab. And I think it is the same semantic shift and observation we can make also in relation to migrant issue. We're not speaking of travailleurs immigrés or Gastarbeiter, which is mainly male and related with working situation. Neither we speak of Arabs, a kind of quality of civilization or nationhood, or Turks. We speak of Muslims in Europe. So we can say that there is this kind of shift towards the conception and self-presentation, which is more and more expressed through religion and through Islam. There is a paradox here, of course, because these Muslim girls who wear the Islamic headscarf are in the public schools. In a way, they are much more integrated than the previous generation of their mothers, who were at home and who didn't speak German and French. So these Muslim girls, in a way, are also more French and more German. We can put the question the other way around also, say that being a Muslim helps them to go beyond the stigmatization of their parents, like Turkish analphabet who cannot speak German, or French Algerian who had the colonial past. In a way, it's a distancing from their parents' origins. Anyhow, they are trying to create, I would say, they are creating, in a process of creating what we can call hyphenated identities, trying to be both Muslim and European, both Muslim and French and German. One of the words in France which is discussed, we need to have musulmans d'Europe et pas musulmans en Europe. So how to have Muslims, not having Muslims in Europe, but European Muslims. So one of the ways of putting the question. But Europe and Islam is not a one-way relation, but a two-way relation, should be thought as a transversal relation, and Europe is not a fixity, and into which we expect migrants, Muslims, to be integrated, to be assimilated, but what we are seeing that it is itself, Europe is transformed by its relation to Islam. The headscarf debate shows it at the national scale. But the Turkish membership, the debates triggered, provoked by the Turkish membership, shows to what extent Europe, at the European scale, the way Europeans define themselves in relation to Islam becomes decisive for the European identity. The debate first started in France, where Turkish migration was not a major issue. It started with Giscard d'Estaing's interventions, but then it built up during the last 3 years. It became an agenda-setting issue, and all citizens were almost involved. Since last 2 years, we were hearing that citizens of Europe were not enough involved in the debate. On the Turkish membership, they were involved. Turkish membership triggered a societal debate not on Turkey, but on the European identity. It played a role of catharsis. If we take Turkey, would say many French intellectuals and citizens, then we won't have a feeling of difference. We will be diluted. So where the frontiers will start, how we will define the frontiers of Europe if we include Turkey. Why not Russia? Why not Morocco, would say some. So accepting Turkey would mean renouncing to Europe, would have written many intellectuals. Means forgetting the Western victory over the Ottoman army when the siege of Vienna was lifted in 1683. And others would say we need the other to define ourselves. So I have written, would identifying Europe would mean othering Turkey? I think that's what happened in the last 3 years. More and more, we are discussing European identity, and Turkey was distanced. But something more important is happening as well. An unspoken tacit equation between Europe and its Christian heritage is becoming more and more outspoken and explicit. I think the lecture of the Pope Benedict XVI at the University of Regensburg here in Germany can be read in this direction of trying to define Europe in relation to its Christian heritage and values of rationality and in counter-distinction with Islam. We can say, in general, at a more abstract level, that religion is becoming decisive in Europe. We have described always in social sciences Europe as secular Europe in counter-distinction with pious America. But newcomers to Europe, Muslims, but also Polish and others, bring into the religious issue. But also the Turkish membership, I would say, brings, therefore, the identity issue for Europeans, which is more and more based on this equation, on this inspiration from the heritage of the Christian past that we name as cultural values. So more and more religion is becoming decisive in Europe in definition of cultural values, collective identities, whether it is European or Islamic, and public controversies. Habermas, again speaking this very interesting debate that took place between Habermas and Cardinal Ratzinger in 2004 in this Catholic Academy of Bavaria, trying to name pre-political moral foundations of the state. It's interesting to see a secular progressist intellectual and a more conservative position. And Habermas will speak of the absence of the political idea in Europe and the need for a transnational European public. Well, I will argue that this idea is there, but it's not political, but it is becoming more and more cultural. And there is the formation of a transnational public sphere in Europe, but through the controversies around Islam. And I think secularist intellectuals, maybe they do not address, they are religious blind, we can say, issues of religion, cultural values, Islam or Turkish membership. Conservatives do, but they do most often in an exclusionary way. So there is passion in Europe, but the passion is mobilized mostly around issues, controversies triggered by Islamic presence. We can say public controversies around Islam fueled European passion. Encounter with Islam reactivates European process. Cultural values of Europe are debated in relation to Islam, such as freedom of expression or blasphemy, where are the frontiers? Gender equality, headscarf debate. Religion should be private or public, where is the place of religion? European self-discovery is therefore in tension, in conflict with issues raised by Islam. I would say old Europe becomes a novel experience in a way. And these public sphere formed by these cultural controversies maybe escape the attention of secular intellectuals like Habermas because it is not rational discursive discussions that we see in this public sphere. It is much more emotional. It is much more pictorial, communication through images, symbols, like cartoons, cliché in both senses, cliché like image, but also these ideas on the other, very short, clichés, simplified, not giving space for complexity, because they circulate more easily. They can be reproduced as cartoons were reproduced much easily than ideas, and have an instant sensorial effect. So public sphere becomes transversal much easily than the political sphere. Political sphere is bounded to national borders. I think the power relation between public sphere and politics are changing. And maybe public sphere is not that easily linked to democracy, because it's become much more related with emotional, passionate, and sensorial communication. And in this encounter, before coming to the end, I would say there are new sites of battleground that are revealed that we should understand. Europe and Islam are debating the cultural orientations of modernity on the battleground of body. The body is becoming a central focus in these discussions. Gender, body. Is it defined, the locus, as secular emancipation or religious morality? We discuss in relation to Islam and its conception of gender equality, but we also discuss in relation to same-sex marriage, abortion, euthanasia. Second site that we should hear is memory. Memory is becoming very important in this conflictual encounter. Genocides, crusades. I will give the example of the law that passed in the French Parliament to criminalize the negationism of Armenian genocide. I would say it is also captured in this new tension between Turkey and Europe. But also what we remember is also as important as what we forget. 9/11 became a memory date at the global scale. The fall of Berlin Wall, I think, became the most important European memory, but the destruction of the Mostar Bridge, which represented so beautifully in the artistic form something exceptional, and its destruction and the related genocide problems in Bosnia was forgotten. It is in the archives. European Muslims are forgotten, are repressed in our memories. They didn't have the right to come to the memory at the European scale, neither at the global scale. Third battleground is space, how we define space, because how we define commonality, what is public, what is private, the frontiers. And again, the frontiers of Europe. Europe can be a common space or not. How we define the definition of frontiers. So these three, body, space, and memory, are becoming more and more decisive in this confrontation and discussions on the cultural values, cultural orientation of our modernity. That is what is about awareness. I'm trying to bring a different perspective, a different angle of reading this Europe and Islam encounter. But then you should ask me, then what should we do? The intellectual, I think the thing is first intellectual agenda. It is this kind of paradigmatic mental shift we need, maybe as we are doing here now, in order to capture the nature, the changing nature of relation between Europe and Islam, not as two distinct and separated entities in time and space, Europe being in advance, others lagging behind, geographically different, but sharing same space and same time-space. Simultaneously, we're discussing these issues. So therefore, the proximity, but proximity doesn't engender similarity. On the contrary, it creates frictions, tensions, confrontations, violence. So I'm not trying to take off and give a nice, willing talk that Europe and Islam should be together in the multicultural perspective. I'm saying we have to take into consideration where the conflicts are based, and we have to name them, understand them. So there's a kind of process of mutual interpenetration in these zones of contact and interaction. Maybe we should think of Europe also as a tormented soul, instead of fixing it as an identity, closing its borders. If we do not want Europe to be a phantom of the past, again playing with the soul, essoufflé, as French say, taken out of breathless. We should remember maybe the ancient meaning of having a soul, that is courage. A soul for Europe would then mean having courage to face new challenges and become aware that it is in relation to different faces of Islam, most Europeanized faces of Islam, that Europe is being shaped today, and it can acquire once more the power to resonate in the world if Europe remain an open society in this process of mutual interpenetration. Thank you.